grab bag type panel where I think we kind of got stuck together because we didn't fit anywhere else. So you'll get a good, interesting range of things. At least as of this moment, you will get papers from myself, Phillip Zapkin, and from Adam Pickens. So I will be presenting first, giving you a paper entitled Fluid Borders, Satoko Ichihara's The Bacchae, Holstein Milk Cows, a Boundary Crossing Adaptation. So I am an assistant teaching professor of English at Penn State University with a PhD from West Virginia University. My scholarship focuses primarily on contemporary world adaptations of Greek drama and mythology, with particular focuses on political economics and democracy. My first book, Hellenic Common, was published by Routledge in 2022, and my essays have appeared in PMLA, Comparative Drama, Modern Drama, and the CDC's own Text and Presentation, along with other places. I am a many-time veteran of the Comparative Drama Conference, since this is my favorite conference, the one that I look forward to every year. And now that we're hopefully properly post-COVID, we will be on a more regular Comparative Drama Conference schedule. So, this is my paper, Fluid Borders, Satoko Ichihara's The Bacchae, Holstein Milk Cows, a Boundary Crossing Adaptation. Before I start, I want to give you fair warning. Buckle up. This is going to be a weird one. This is a fucked up play with a lot of weird shit in it. So, fair warning. Now, as one might expect, the primary work being adapted in Satoko Ichihara's The Bacchae, Holstein Milk Cows is Euripides' Bacchae, a play already interested in the fluidity of boundaries. As the divine son of a mortal, Dionysus is part human and part god. He metamorphoses into a bull. Pentheus is convinced to dress in women's clothing to observe the Menaids. So this play is now off limits for Tennessee, apparently. And Agave kills her son Pentheus, thinking that he's a lion. Clearly, neither identities nor perceptions are stable in Euripides' masterpiece, and Ichihara picks up on this thematic in her 2019 Japanese adaptation. Her play explores the crossing of multiple boundaries: sexuality, gender, species, national or racial, and interpersonal. No identity or border seems safe in Ichihara's reworking. But for me, there's a more interesting dimension to the play's dramaturgy, an openness to the multiplicity of Greek myth. In addition to the gender, sexual, and other identity borders crossed by the characters, Ichihara's play takes a fluid approach to adaptation itself, echoing multiple Greek myths or adaptations in her Bacchae re-envisioning without calling direct attention to these other allusions. I'm provisionally calling this covert bricolage, a form of blending multiple related sources to create a textual constellation. The combination of different elements is central to the creative process in bricolage, somewhat like collage or quilting. And covert bricolage subtly references other works rather than overtly identifying the multiple sources. So Ichihara's plot is somewhat difficult to follow because she plays freely with timelines and, in the tradition of Greek myth and tragedy, seems more concerned about an impression rather than strict chronological narrative. However, in essence, the plot is something like this. The main speaker, housewife, seems sex-obsessed. From her former job as a cow inseminator to her habit of going to sex clubs, to her detailed description of having sex with 2 women at these clubs, to her reflections on how cornflakes was invented as an anti-masturbatory food, most of Housewife's dialogue is related to sex in some way. She narrates how she had wanted a baby, but not from someone she knew, so she ordered a Japanese man's sperm from a Danish company, but then decided to put the sperm in a cow, which gives birth to Beast, a human-cow hybrid. Apparently, decades later, though time is fuzzy in this play, Beast returns as leader of a religious cult focused on purifying the suffering of cows through feminist or lesbian butter massage, and they, since Beast's gender is ill-defined, try to recruit Housewife into the group with the intention of inseminating her. As Beast is trying to rape Housewife, she rips off their penis, which apparently liberates Beast from the sexual confusion and urges that had made their entire life a baffling jumble. The primary boundary crossings I discuss here are interspecies and gender fluidity. Housewife traverses the species boundary first when she decides to use Japanese sperm she'd ordered from Denmark to inseminate a cow at her job. This results in the birth of Beast, the human-cow hybrid. According to the chorus, Beast is a creature with a human upper half and a Holstein lower half. This is the most generative of the interspecies sexual activities in the play, but it is far from the only one. The chorus also recounts the story of a farmer who got a calf to perform fellatio, and in a segment seemingly disconnected from the rest of the plot, Dog tells the story of being sodomized by an unnamed old man. While these two are largely standalone stories, Beast's sexual desire for Housewife is an important recurring aspect of the plot. In a choral song, Beast announces, "I want to let my semen swim in my mother's uterus. I make my mother birth my duplicate. I want to save my soul." Throughout the play, Beast conceptualizes Housewife as their mother because she raised them. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. The irony is that Housewife played the role of inseminator, which is typically the father's role rather than a mother's. This introduces another form of border crossing in the play, as Housewife's own gender and sexuality is fluid. Not only does she play the masculine role in fertilizing cows, she also sexually prefers women and sometimes experiences herself as masculine. Housewife has had multiple male sexual partners, but when she recounts her first threesome with another woman, the man is largely excluded from their lovemaking. And while Housewife does continue to have sex with men, her own sexuality and gender identity aren't set in any way. When a young woman asks her to have sex in a windowed room at the sex club, the experience was unfulfilling because the other woman performed for the men watching rather than genuinely having sex with Housewife. During this encounter, Housewife says, "As I touched her, I felt as if I'd become a man, the man that I kept inside. The man I had kept inside was coming out, and he was acting like a male porn star for the peeping men." Housewife experiences herself as masculine in this moment, paralleling the masculine role of insemination that's part of her job. However, she's still essentially a woman, and what she enjoys about same-sex sexuality is the identification with her partner. Her gender fluidity is mirrored by Beast's uncertain gender. At times, Beast claims that the phallic protrusion between their legs is a giant clitoris, while at other times acknowledging it as a penis. Like every aspect of Beast's identity, gender is hybrid. But my main interest in Ichihara's play is a different kind of hybridity, however, the combination of multiple mythic elements beyond just Euripides' Bacchae. The most overt allusion is to the centaur myth, linked to Housewife's middle school classmate. She describes how her classmate was viciously taunted for being half Japanese and half foreign, which is another form of boundary crossing, this time interracial. She was called centaur because of her butt. As Housewife recalls, she had a really big butt, atypical of Japanese people, because Japanese have no butts, but hers stuck out behind her like 3 times the size of mine. She had apparently a horrific childhood based on Housewife's brief description of this. And although there is an overt link between the nickname centaur and the mythical half-horse, half-human, Ichihara downplays this connection by relating it instead to a video game. Housewife says, "There was a popular fighting video game at the time with a character that was a female centaur. You know how centaurs' butts stick all the way back?" So even this most overt allusion to mythology outside the Bacchae is camouflaged with an external modern reference. But the other connections are more subtle. The hybrid beast is most directly a reference to Dionysus, who changes back and forth between human and bull in Euripides' Bacchae. Having a human upper half and a cow lower body also parodies the centaur with its human upper half and horse lower half. But Beast also reflects the myth of Pasiphae, who falls in love with a bull and gives birth to the Minotaur. In the myth, Pasiphae has Daedalus build her a mechanical bull suit, which she enters to be mounted by the bull. And this is specifically evoked when Housewife remembers being raped by her husband, and she describes the mechanical ironing board-like device used to get bull's sperm. To deal with the rape, Housewife repeats to herself, "I am an ironing board." trying to identify with the featureless mounting board. And of course, Beast, Housewife's child in a sense, is an inversion of the Minotaur from the Pasiphae legend. Because the Minotaur has a bull's head and a human body, whereas Beast has a human upper body and a cow's lower half. Beast's story thus combines Dionysus, centaurs, and the Minotaur into one figure. And this is a form of bricolage in and of itself, in which multiple mythic strands are pulled together to construct a new, complex character. But even these aren't the only myths that Beast alludes to. Their desire to impregnate Housewife connects with the Oedipus story as well, because Oedipus marries and fathers children with his mother Jocasta. Like Oedipus cast out shortly after birth, Housewife abandons Beast during childhood. But when Beast returns, meeting up with Housewife as an adult, they are dedicated to having sex with her. Although Oedipus slept with his mother unknowingly, according to Sophocles, Beast inverts this and declares an overt intention. They soliloquize, "I will let my semen swim inside my mother's uterus. Multitudes of me will swim at full speed toward my mother's egg. My luckiest and strongest self will break through to my mother's egg, finally becoming one fertilized egg. I'll await my reincarnation in my mother's uterus as I receive her blood through the placenta. I will be reborn from my mother's vagina. Mother will embrace me, and I will possess her nipples as I suck them dry. I'll suck that spurting white liquid that I never had." Again, the obvious difference between Oedipus and Beast is that Oedipus unknowingly impregnates his mother, but it is worth noting some of the specific connections implied in this passage. At the end, Beast mentions never having gotten to suckle at their mother's nipples, and as an exposed child, Oedipus similarly would not have had this experience. Beast refers to being reincarnated through their mother's womb, and while Oedipus is not reincarnated as such, most of his children, Polynices, Eteocles, and Antigone especially, share the stubbornness and single-mindedness that make their father-brother a tragic hero. And so in this sense, they could be said to replicate him as tragic figures in their own right. The final outside reference I want to address is actually not to Greek mythology directly, but to Sarah Kane's play Phaedra's Love, which adapts the Hippolytus myth. At the end of Kane's play, Theseus and a mob strangle, disembowel, and emasculate Hippolytus before Theseus barbecues his son's genitals. Ichihara pays homage to this brutal ending. When Beast tries to rape Housewife near the end of the play, she rips off their genitals and says, "Maybe I'll soak it in barbecue sauce and grill it tonight." The play ends with a final choral ode as we watch Housewife cook the sliced penis on a hot plate, and the final stage directions instruct, "The smell of grilled meat fills the air." This depiction of sporasmos and homophagia, the tearing apart of a living being and the eating of their flesh, definitely echoes Euripides' Bacchae, in that Agave and the Menaids tear Pentheus apart and feast on his flesh. But the barbecuing of genitals is a distinctly Cain allusion, going beyond simply ripping apart a body to consume the flesh. This choice to reference Phaedra's Love, or at least to sort of pay homage to Phaedra's Love, creates an additional layer of bricolage because Euripides' Hippolytus, which is, of course, the earliest surviving dramatic version of the Hippolytus story, was famously reimagined by Seneca during the Roman period and Jean Racine in 17th century France. And while there have obviously been many adaptations of many Greek plays, few versions have done as much to redefine the way that we in popular culture think of a story as Seneca and Racine have done. Having cataloged these illusions, I hear you cry, "But Philip, why does any of this matter?" Allow me to answer your question with an answer. This network of subtle allusions to a constellation of Greek myths and their receptions is, as I said before, what I've termed covert bricolage. Again, covert bricolage is the obscured use of multiple references from a common source like Greek mythology. And this is in contrast to a play like Anne-Marie MacDonald's Goodnight Desdemona, Good Morning Juliet, in which Constance, the protagonist, directly travels into the worlds of Othello and Romeo and Juliet. That would be what I'm terming overt bricolage, and at some point I will get around to writing an article talking about these two ideas in more detail. What's significant about the process of bricolage, though, is that it recreates the process through which mythic worlds have traditionally been built. Historically, mythic stories didn't exist in isolation, but as mutually reinforcing parts of narrative universes. In her book, The Story of Myth, Sarah Johnston describes the interconnected role of the many stories within a mythic tradition, writing, "Each story stands as a guarantor of the existential rules underlying the others and is in turn guaranteed by them. Each of them contributes to a completely furnished world from which audience members may subsequently break off pieces to use as a situation demands, pieces that still refract the authority and allure of the whole." In other words, mythic stories exist within a circular feedback loop, with each story contributing to a socially accepted truth value of every other story, and thereby establishing its own truth value within that loop. In this way, according to Johnston, communities have traditionally produced self-reinforcing worldviews that shape how people within those societies understand the universe. Of course, few people today believe in Greek mythology, but it still matters that adapters like Ichihara build such constellations of myth because culture itself can be said to be constructed through these constellations. Part of the reason Greek myth and drama has the cultural cachet that it does is because recursive cultural loops ensure its ongoing power. Whenever Sophocles is performed, or a movie is made of the Iliad, or Euripides adapted, or Disney's Hercules is shown in schools, the centrality of Greek antiquity to our own culture is strengthened. These texts have cultural power because we collectively determine their worth, and that worth depends on repetition, which is part of the reason that adaptation in general, and bricolage in particular, are such culturally significant techniques. Thank you.